Alrighty. Do-do-do. Alrighty. Hello, hello. So, today we're going to go over the Duviri section for the third time and hopefully the last. Yeah, the last couple of times have not really gone well, so I've unlisted those videos and we'll just try to go through the Duviri section and actually finish it. So let me know if there are any issues. I think I should have fixed most of the problems with the stream and with the audio, but let me know if anything shows up. So yeah, we're going over the Duviri paradox section. This is gonna go over a bunch of concept and character art for the Duviri paradox and like that world overall. And it starts off with a message from Rebecca, the creative director. The Duviri paradox was conceived many years before its 2023 release, and a lot changed along the way. We wanted to ensure that even with a newer team leading the way, we remain true to the core conception of this place, a void-cursed open world. We played with color in new ways and built out unique playable spirals of Duviri that reflect the emotions of Dominus Thrax. Visually, this update was the culmination of 10 years of ideas, technology, and team experience that allowed us to give players one of our most beautiful updates ever. It was a dream to work on, and the team outdid itself. Everything seems good. That's good to hear. It's good to hear. Playing Soulframe? Nice. I wonder, I feel like Duviri, of all parts of Warframe, is like has the most overlap with Soulframe. And so yeah, the banner image for this chapter is really nice, and it shows. This is an older concept art that they showed off at TennoCon in 2023. I don't know, or maybe 2022. It was either just before or just after. It was probably 22 when they showed off the concept art of Duviri, which I'm sure we'll see more of in this section. But yeah, the original concept for Duviri was that the Zariman ship would have these terraforming devices, so if they arrived to Tau and they couldn't find suitable land, they could just sort of generate the land themselves, which is kind of a funny idea that I don't know makes a ton of sense. But that was sort of the original concept, and then when it got stranded in the void, this stuff went haywire and just started generating terrain all on its own, and mixed with like the void energy, and you get these weird fractal patterns and like all the weird nonsense. So I'm pretty sure that's what this is supposed to be. These giant gray pillars are the terraforming devices of the Zariman, and in a lot of early concepts, you do see like these types of structures in focal points on the land, like on the tops of hills and stuff. So I think a lot of this design, made it through, pretty far into the game. But I think the ultimate lore behind that was scrapped. I have times all the time in Soulframe where it feels like Duviri, yeah. Yeah, the Ode, those are like the enemies, right? They're like, yeah, they've got all the metal parts. Lots of curves and circles. Yeah, so conceptual embodiment is the current lore for how Duviri comes to be. But yeah, this older lore is that it was partly a technological process. Which I think is why there's like these fractal repeating things as, sort of like getting extruded like a 3D printer, maybe. Anyway, but yeah, I find just Duviri to be very fascinating. There's, it's part of it's so janky because it took so long to get through development. We first got teased on Duviri in 2019 at the tail end of the Railjack demo, and then we didn't, it didn't end up showing up until what, 22? Yeah. No, I think early 2023, if I'm remembering right. God. Yeah, no, time, dates, who knows. But it was several years. And so things changed, the team changed in between that time, as Rebecca mentions. And so yeah, I think Duviri is one of those things where the concept art is probably going to be the most. We've actually gone through this section. I just don't remember a lot of it. But the concept art is going to be interesting simply because of how much it's changed over the years. And so there's concept art that shows up that doesn't really even make sense anymore. Anyway, yeah, April 2023. Yeah, I remember because I think it was supposed to be like the 2022 update, and it just kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed. And so it ended up in April 2023. Anyway, yeah, now there's like a whole lot I could talk about Duviri, but let's just get into the art of it. We got this first one is Akrithis' carriage. It's like this, a lot of detailed sketch work, so it might be hard to see, but you can't actually. Akrithis is not actually in here. There's two people in the carriage, and one of them is holding like a bottle of something, and the other one is holding like a long stick. And they're like selling it to the drifter, who is not wearing many clothes. And so it seems like this carriage slash merchant was the concept for this was around before Akrithis herself as a character. And then you've got the Dax in front and behind. I keep meaning to see, because the carriage has the secondary carriage behind it with like another Dax guard in it, who seems to have like a gun. Both of these rifles both of these Dax seem to have rifles with bayonets, which is interesting. I don't think Akrithis' carriage in game actually has this secondary caboose thing. But her carriage is implied to be. I think she mentions Dax driving her carriage in one of her lore fragments, and there is a Dax as part of the game model, but I don't think he's not an enemy. He's just like part of the carriage. But yeah, this, Akrithis' carriage rolling around. I would love to get more lore, kind of like on, oh, sorry, just a second. I would love to get more lore on Akrithis, and well, I mean, because the carriage seems to be important. It's a very interesting shape. It made it into this concept art, and even Sithel mentions Akrithis' carriage in her like ramblings. So, I do think Akrithis is one of my favorite characters in Duviri. Just because she's like the archivist, historian, librarian type, which is always going to be my favorite type of person in Warframe. Nobody mentions there being a ship in the sky. Yeah, that is something that Akrithis says. She says that no one talks about the Zariman. They pretend like it's not there, which is very interesting. Hello, Chris. Nice to see you. All right, so over here on this page, we've got We've got something labeled three-headed giant Dax, and so it's like a thick Dax with three heads and giant sword arms, kind of. And then, Warframe for scale. I'm assuming it's a Warframe because it's got Syandana, although, of course, drifters can wear Syandanas. But it's got, I mean, it seems to be a Warframe to me. It's a really sketched out, thing, so you can't really say for one way or the other. But yeah, this giant three-headed Dax is a very interesting concept. Obviously something that we don't see in the game. Especially at this size. Geez, it's like the size of an Eidolon. And yeah, I have no idea how you'd manage to fight that. I have to imagine if we did end up getting something crazy like this, it would be more like an Aura Worm fight, where you're not really like the first part of the Aura Worm fight, where you're just sort of climbing on it and disabling it rather than actually fighting it. Because, I mean, yeah, yeah, it's huge. And then in this in the inset here, we've got an underground location that is labeled Soul Village, with soul in quotes. And this is interesting. It reminds me a lot of the Nether Barrow, which is the city in Duviri that is underground on like the eastern island, or under the eastern island. It's sort of like that, although this seems to be in like a cavern. There's like a roof, it's like enclosed, and there's like these pillars of rocks with rock bridges leading to it. And there's faces in the rock, and then above the village there's just a set of giant hands holding another face that's just looking down. And then you can see the the Duviri architecture with the arches and the domes, and then you've got the drifter on the Kaith over here. Or this is just a full-blown horse, actually. But yeah, this is if I'm sure anyone who's spent any time in Duviri will have been to the Nether Barrow, which is like on a ledge or set of ledges underneath one of the major islands. It's not entirely like this, because this is like on a pedestal in the middle of a cavern. The Nether Barrow is just sort of hanging underneath the edge of the islands. It's like where a couple of parts of it overlap, actually. So there's various districts to it. And then there's a big... there's like a main staircase leading down into it, but you can get to it from all sorts of different angles, including tunnels through the mountain, and also just like flying over the edge in the cave. I wish we still got to be able to one-shot an Aura Worm like in the trailer. I mean, that would that would just be sort of a boring fight. It was a cool trailer. But yeah, that would let us get those Pathos clamps too fast. So, oh yeah, I remember these. So here you've got a statue of what is presumably Dominus Thrax. Which it's very interesting. So obviously the pose of this is reminiscent of the famous like Napoleon portrait where he's on a horse in basically this exact pose. And Dominus Thrax does have this image of himself that he tries to put forward as like a conquering, victorious king, which no one believes because he's like an actual child. And then he is... So, it looks like he's missing the weird triangular thing on his back, and he's also dressed a lot like Ballas. You can see here, he's got sort of the weird robes that Ballas wears, and then he has a paracesis at his side. In the sheath, too. So, so yeah, it's Dominus Thrax on a case, but like a very, very Orokin looking Thrax. which is pretty cool. There are statues of Dominus Thrax on horses on horseback. I'm pretty sure in Duviri, but none of them with this specific pose. And then here you've got a couple of the Thrax, or sorry, the Dax, the Duviri Dax with their weird skeletal things. I noticed this earlier. A lot of these concepts, and we can see it over here too. They have, for the Dax specifically, they seem to be partially made of this sort of translucent or white material that looks like crystals that are like growing on over themselves. And it sort of looks like their bodies are like partially decaying into this material. You know, it looks pretty fragile and has these small like loops and folds and stuff like that. I'm not really sure how to describe it. Versus the rest of their body, which is more just metallic and straightforward, and then but it seems to turn partway through their bodies in various places into this other brittle material, which is really interesting. I'm not really sure. I guess in a way it a little bit reminds me of like the angel / murmur material, but not really, because that's like more smooth and swirling. And this looks. I'm trying to figure out how to describe this. It's sort of like you squeezed like a bunch of toothpaste down, and it made these like, you know, the little loopy shapes, and then it just froze there. That's sort of what it looks like to me. Like toothpaste or frosting or something. And then yeah, and it looks like, especially in this on the helmet, it's like sort of eating away at the original metal material. And so on this page you have these two, which are not colored, so you can't see the distinction as well. But then down here you have these 4 Dax models that you can more clearly see what I'm talking about. And they've got interesting weapons too. This looks like one of the big ones, like the Malleus, who usually has the hammer, but he's got like a big 2-handed sword. This guy has like 1 bulky leg and 1 skeletal leg. And he's also got like a pretty big sword. You got some sort of like war club or mallet here. Sword, and then this one, I think this one is like a gun. This one looks a lot like the Gotva Prime / Aolak, which is, it makes a little bit sense because the Aolak is carried by the Thrax Legatus. But you see, it's got the spines on the end. It's like the Gotva Prime, but and the weapons as well are also sort of decaying into this brittle material, including this gun. Of course, none of the enemies in Duviri have guns, but it's interesting that, except I guess the Legatus in the Undercraft. But yeah, it's interesting that this one has a gun. I don't think I noticed that the first time we flipped through this. And also, as I mentioned, these Dax guards over here have what seem to be rifles. I wonder how much of old Duviri made it into current Duviri. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is like one of those topics I would love to... If I ever was able to talk to the people at DE, I would love to know... I mean... I'd have to make a huge list of the questions I'd ask, but one of the topics that interests me is how things change in development. They've mentioned how like Deimos, the Deimos open world and the Necrolisk and the Andrade family, that sort of changed because that was supposed to come after the New War. The New War, of course, changed a lot. Even if any of you are around, earlier than that, the Sacrifice changed a lot in development, and I believe the War Within too. These big cinematic quests, they've got like lots of story to tell, and I do think that the main points of the story, at least up until around the sacrifice were drafted and, you know, thought of like many years ago, before possibly before the game even really started. You know, things like the Tenno and the Warframes and their nature. But the actual details of the quests, they've changed around a lot, and it really interests me to know, you know, how and where those changes happened and for what reason. You know, to give us larger context into the world as it is, and possibly any indications of where they might go in the future. Right, so at the top you've got, these are not decks. These are the courtiers, or possibly, I mean, yeah, they are the courtiers. This one is most obviously Bombastine. He's got the headdress. He's even got the weird thing on his front. He's got this weird mechanical thing on his chest. I have no idea what it is. But he even in this concept, he has it. And then all of them are accompanied by like a short Dax or Dax type character who is not decaying like these guys, and is just sort of helping them out there. And this we saw in the very earliest concept art. I don't think it's in here, but oh, it is actually in. This is exactly. I'm just gonna flip ahead a couple of pages to this. This sketch right here was the first thing we ever saw about the Duviri paradox, or at least the. This was shown off on a dev stream. Yeah, I do believe this was before even the TennoCon demo that hinted at it. This was shown off on a dev stream as Plains of Duviri, and it was literally just this artwork of Dominus Strax on the throne. We didn't know his name, of course, but Dominus Strax on the throne, and then this short guy carrying the end of his cape. We'll come back to this later, but that was like the first time we ever saw anything, was this short little Dax guy helping out, you know, being a servant to another. And so you see this with these the four courtiers up here. You have Bombastine. I should look this up. I think this is Sithal. I don't think it's honestly been a while since I've spent too much time in Duviri, which is a shame because I also love it. But I think this is Sithal's sort of headdress. She's got the fan on top. The characters, of course, have changed, you know, between concept and reality. This is Akrithis over here. This is definitely Akrithis' helmet, and they're holding a scroll here, and it's actually open. We never see these. You can see in Akrithis' carriage, and also in the Arc Arbor, which is her library island. You see these like big giant rotating, what I assume are scroll racks or some sort of storage device for lore. But she's actually got one of these scrolls out and like extended, and it's actually got writing on it. It's not any alphabet. It's a little bit similar to the Hulvanian Proto-Orican script, but it's not that. That's interesting. But yeah, there's actually writing on it. And then you've got the helper Dax with like a handful of other scrolls, and then she's got this like rectangular case, presumably also containing scrolls. So yeah, this is a really cool concept art of her. I wonder. It's a little hard to tell. I don't even know if Akrithis is male or female in this concept version of it. Yeah, and she's also got what looks like a quill, you know, some sort of Duviri version of a quill, in right here. But yeah, you've got Sithal, although she's sort of smiling, not so, you know, not very much like the Sithal we know. And yeah, and you know, nothing here. And then this is, you know, probably going to be Loden, obviously very different from what he ultimately looks like. And then yeah, and then you can note that a lot, as in the real game, they have the the Orokin long arm that's got the made out of blue metal. Akrithis has a actually, huh? Yeah, this arm I would. It's hard to say because I think Akrithis' arm is sort of like. It's bent at the elbow. The elbow's resting on the trunk, and then she's holding the quill up to her face. So it's hard to tell. It is. I do think it's like a longer than normal because her elbow's resting on this. But it's not as thin as the other ones. It looks more bulky and mechanical. But yeah, the courtier is just very is a very interesting aspect of. Okay, yeah. So here, So this is what I'm talking about. This is Akrithis' headdress. And then there's also an inside of it with the helmet closed, which she does do. In game, she can close up her helmet when she's not talking to you. But this is like a male, versus Akrithis, who is female, and it's also it looks like Tuval. For some reason, I'm not sure why, Tuval's concept art is also over here. And the face, I would say, is similar. So, so it's interesting that Akrithis seems to have been originally male. And I guess partially modeled off of Tuval. I'm just gonna skip over here to Tuval really quickly. I'm not sure why he's in here. As Tuval was, of course, the patron of the Zariman expedition, but as far as we know, he has no real influence in Duviri. Even Ballas, as the warden, is sort of in Duviri. But yeah, he's got a tablet here, and this really cool Signa thing over his head. This is actually a really good concept image of Tuval, and I'm definitely gonna get a high quality scan of this and use it in future lore videos if I can. We got some case customizations. I think these are actually just. I think these are very similar to these are actual case customizations you can buy for the face and the head. You've got. You've got Loden over here. This. So he's holding a dagger. He's holding a dagger, and if you watched the original Tenocon demo of Duviri, not the 2019 one, but the 2022 one, this guy's name is actually Lekros, not Tuval, and he's got this Incarnon-looking dagger. Not this one specifically, but that's what he uses to kill the Drifter with. Maybe Tuval was going to be the Warden. Maybe. I mean, the whole Kullervo thing seems to have been, it's very much like an Echoes type thing. So I don't know how much Kullervo and the Warden was in the actual Duviri, or the original story for Duviri. And then next we have a Dax. I think this is one of the archers, or maybe the horseback rider ones. They've got more of a full. They're not as skeletal as the others, I think. But yeah, just a Dax. It is always hard for me to describe in writing the Dax. In the Duviri article I made, and I think in the write-ups I have for the quest and the demos, I spent a long time going back and forth on how to just describe the really weird aesthetic they've got, where they're kind of made of metal and kind of made of bones, but also the bones are not really. They're also metal, but a different kind of. It's Um, they're like hollow, but also, you know, it's very weird. And then up here you've got a Dax Malleus. This is basically very similar to the final in-game version, just without the weapon. Just you know, the big boy Dax. And then here, this is weird. Oh no, I know what this is actually. This is the thing, the drifter puppet from the cutscene. Okay, I was really wondering what this was. So this is like a puppet. It's got like the ball joints, similar to the Thrax toy that you gradually piece together during the quest. But if you remember the cutscene before the quest, that was also shown off, you know, separately on YouTube. There's like a puppet of the Drifter that is fighting in like a toy Aura Worm in a theater at the same time that the real Drifter is fighting the real Aura Worm outside. And this is the toy puppet. And yeah, it's got like the Drifter clothes on over here, and so that like confused me because at first I thought it was the Thrax puppet, but it's a Drifter puppet. That cutscene was weird. But because like yeah, like the Tenno come through and then defeat the Aura Worm, and the Thrax resets it again anyway. I'm not sure what that was supposed to imply, but yeah, this is the Drifter puppet that basically only shows up in the cutscene. All right, here we've got Duviri Teshin. Very cool, very cool. The scars on his face that are like sort of glowing and like healed with like void energy or something like that, which I always thought was cool. I kind of thought the implication was that the scars were from like how he died, or was because like Era was like holding his hat with his hands and then sort of just like shook him until he died, and so it's like maybe he broke his neck. You know, maybe he tried to crush his skull and like the helmet caused the scarring. I don't know. It's not like, and it is not super clear, and it obviously doesn't matter. But to me, I just assumed that the scars were due to like how Era killed him or not killed him. And then, but yeah, over here he's got a really big Duvir. He's got a walking stick in the quest, I'm pretty sure. But this is like a really big one. And then yeah, one of his legs is like robotic, got replaced. The other one is in his Dax armor. He's still kind of wearing his Dax armor. He's just also wearing this blue hooded robe over it. But it seems that, and he's obviously not wearing the hat, the helmet. But it does seem that like one of his feet was had to be replaced with like a metal version of it. And then over here you've got the pictures of Dominus Thrax that we saw, the one on his throne. The throne, by the way, is also decaying into this weird substance that looks a lot more crystalline over here. It looks a lot more like glass. But again, it's got like this decaying quality. It's being eaten away here. It's sort of withering along these like lines. With the servant Dax with the cape, and again here is Dax on the ground standing. Again with the servant guy with the cape, and here he does have the weird triangle thing on his back. And then here is Thrax having been defeated, clearly. He's on the ground, and his mechanical long right arm as well as his mask are like broken and, you know, fallen off of him. And I think is his cape. His cape is also fallen off. Not the weird thing on his back though, that's still there. Or like the rest of his sort of armor. But yeah, the arm and the mask, and then he's got, you know, the face underneath, which is just very unhappy. And then yeah, he's got like tubes and wiring. He looks almost like a Grenier. You know, they've got all the stuff keeping them alive. Um, yeah, this is a really weird and interesting picture, and someone in the Discord has asked me to scan this and pop it in like the Discord because it which I will because it's just very it's very interesting and makes you think about again like the different ways the Duviri story was supposed to go. Um, because yeah, even when you do defeat Thrax in the quest and in like the cutscene before the quest, uh, this doesn't happen to him. So that's very interesting. And here we've got some aura worms. um, yeah, they've got the head antenna things like this. This one's got a rifle underneath it. It looks like some sort of like turret mounted underneath the head, which is very interesting. We still, it's not obviously the aura worms are the courtiers. They turn into the aura worms. That's pretty strongly implied by their dialogue in the quest. The picture's on the wiki. That's interesting. I'm actually gonna. I want to look that up really quick. I kind of want to know what the wiki says about it. Mr. X. Yeah, it is. It's down here in the gallery, and it's clearly a scan of the art book. Yeah, it's got this line under the page. That's cool. Yeah. I mean, I'll still get my own scan of it. I guess just for my records, but that's interesting. I wonder who in the wiki editors has like the art book, because like I guess you could in theory, scan all of these pages and upload them. I don't know that anyone's done that. I know that there's obviously this series, but there's also other videos of people going through the art book. I don't know that anyone has uploaded like all the scans of the book, and I feel like that would kind of be a shitty thing to do. Well, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, the art book like cost a lot of money, and obviously DE has an interest in if they continue to release it, I guess keeping supply limited. But in the other sense, it is. I think there's lots of interesting information in here. Just at the end of the day. I mean, yeah, that's I guess a complicated topic, but yeah. So you have the oral worm with like a turret. They don't have a turret in the game, but they do have like the little wormlings that shoot at you. This one's got debris. I don't know if the debris is like falling off of the worm or if it is. It's got like a huge open mouth, so it like might be eating the debris. It's also got Bombastein's, close to Bombastein's headdress. It doesn't have the these weird tendrils that most aura worms have, and they do have in this art. But it's got like the 4-ringed helmet that Bombastein has, which if you ever fight his aura worm during the Envy Spiral, his worm does have that thing. It has the Bombstein headdress. And then yeah, the big rings around them. Seems that they were not really sure where they wanted those to go, because this one only has them at the very end. This one only has them at the very front. And then, of course, in game, they're in like a couple of places throughout the middle of them. This is like a nice colored version showing the head and like these like long red banners. I don't know. This sort of like these other head things are like look like they're partially turning into mist. I don't know if that's just because the artist didn't want to finish. Yeah, I think that's what it is, because most of this is like unfinished except for the parts that they wanted to highlight. And then the rest is just sort of sketched out and just not colored or really defined at all. And then you got like a detail of the tail of it, with like a ball at the end. Aura worms were meant to eat conceptual embodiments in the void, so the mouth makes sense. I've heard that before, but as far as I know, there's no actual basis for that. Aura worms were meant to eat conceptual embodiments in the void. I mean, yeah, there's no lore really in the game. I don't know if there's like a comment that someone from DE has made. It kind of makes sense, but again, I don't think there's anything that actually says that. But yeah, the aura worm thing is interesting because, like, yeah, you have in Duviri, of course, the aura worms are the courtiers, but outside of Duviri, you know, you see them in a few places as that are like void related. You can see them in like the void mirrors in the Deimos underground, like the isolation vaults, and in the circular, or no, not in the circulus actually. That one does have a void mirror, but I don't think you can see the aura worms. But also in the Belric and Rania mirror defense in the void tunnel, and in Railjack when you're in the void tunnel there, entering a mission. So like you see them in a lot of non-Duviri but void-based areas, and so we never, as far as I know, have gotten much information on, you know, if these were actual constructs that the Orokin made for some purpose. I mean, because they are very, they do seem to be very Orokin in nature. But yeah, we don't really know about them outside of Duviri, or even if they ever existed outside of Duviri, rather than just being the things from the Duviri storybook. See them swimming alongside the railjack. Yeah, I mean, like, you can see them in a few places, but as far as like what that means, you know, I think we're still mostly in the dark about that. Also, with like the Golden Maw to an extent, like, we've only ever seen the Golden Maw creature thing in, I would say, not real contexts. Because when you see them in the War Within, that's like some sort of like a vision type thing that Teshin is helping you with. And then, of course, they show up in Duviri, which is a void-based conceptual embodiment realm. So, if the Golden Maws ever existed as Orokin constructs, like, what were they and why? Yeah. Alright. But yeah. So here you've got a bunch of case models, and there are, I'm not fully up to date, but there are, you know, a variety of case models. I think this is the base, the normal one. But I think, if I'm remembering correctly, these two over here are actually both actual case models that you can have. This tail looks familiar, and then like this general, like the less skeletal, more fleshed version of the case looks familiar to me. I haven't really messed with my case fashion all that much. And then up here you've got some of the fish. The fish of Duviri are also, they're just as weird as the other animals. I don't know them by name, but I think this one is the Xeron. I think this is the one that starts with an X, is the weird triangle one. And then this, I have no idea. I think this is the one that is described as looking like a log of dead wood in order to confuse predators and catch prey. But I don't know its name. But yeah, they've just got real weird looking fish. And then you've got the Duviri buffalo or bison, which is this is not a thing that we see in the game at all. There's a variety of animals, of course, but we don't see the buffalo. That's an interesting one. It is the Duviri conservation. You know, you can obviously catch the kubros, or the they're not called that. The krubies, the kexats, or the tams, I think, are the three things you can catch. But there's also there's like dialogue in the game files for also catching rablets. And I think when you catch tams, there isn't you can catch tams as conservation targets, but there's no dialogue associated with them that plays in game, but it does exist in the game files. So, but yeah, the conservation system also is supposed to include the rablets. I'm pretty sure the only rablet you see is the one that Teshin has, as far as like the current version of the game. All right, here we've got a lot more of just a random Duviri assets. This one is interesting. So this is like a bust or a statue. I think this is the same helmet I mentioned earlier. I think it's Sithel's. So this is interesting because it's like it's a face and then there's the mask, and the mask is mostly over the face, but you can sort of see the face behind, and the face is sort of sad or neutral at best, and then the face underneath it is smiling. The masks are an interesting part of Duviri. They're very obviously they're like a big theme and motif in Duviri, and there's a little bit of dialogue that mentions them, but we don't get a lot of information as to really why they have such a big thing about masks, and for, like, what the purpose is. There's things that we can like theorize about this. To me, it seems that it's related to like the theater aspect of Duviri. Duviri, really does seem to be based off of like drama, theater, and plays, and so the masks are a very important cultural part of that. But there's also there's other sort of implications to be had, and this statue. The statue is really interesting to me because it sort of implies, obviously a mask hides your true face and expression and emotions to an extent, and that's what's being represented here, with the face and the mask showing completely different expressions. Obviously, you can't really change the expression on the mask, but yeah. And then, yeah, I believe this is Sithel's headdress, which, Sithel's mask in... Actually, let me once again look this up real quick. I'm going off of just, like, my bad memory of this. Yeah, that is not actually Sithel. I think it might be... Let's look at Mathila. Actually, not Mathila either. Huh. that's super weird. Whose helmet is this? Anyway. Can't find anything on the Oro Worm, so it's probably something I picked up from Stellar D. Yeah, I mean, that kind of sounds right. Yeah, like I said, it's a thing that I have heard before, but as far as I know, like, you know, I would say that, like, according to all the lore that we have in the game, yeah, there's nothing that really says that. But I don't know. There's always the chance that the developers have said something in one interview or another, because I don't keep up with all of those. But that also seems like a very specific thing to have been said, so. Anyway, but yeah, so, yeah, we've got the masking. Honestly, this mask headdress looks very familiar to me, but from just checking on the wiki, it doesn't appear to be any of the courtiers, so I don't know what I'm thinking about here. Anyway, but yeah, we've got the mask. The mask concept is very represented here. This is a statue of Acrithis, basically in the same pose as we saw over here. Leaning on the elbow with the quill held up to the hand, and then you've got the scroll, which is, again, got the writing on it. This actually looks a lot like musical notation. Not quite. But it looks a lot like musical notation. Again, this is an alphabet that doesn't really match any of the other ones. Duviri does have a little bit of Orokin writing, not a lot. And then it's also got its own script. I wonder if we'll see any of it here. I don't think we will. It's actually got a weird script that is very similar to... Yeah, I don't think so. It's, you know, because Duviri's architecture is very, like, arch-based and weird rectangle-based. And the letters actually look a lot like that. You, I think, only see them on the signposts. There's, like, at the intersections of roads, there's a signpost that says, like, this is this way and this is this way. The asset is the same, like, everywhere it shows up, so the writing is always the same. But yeah, it's like writing on the signposts in this weird Duviri alphabet that you only, I'm pretty sure, ever see on the signposts. It looks like the Orokin headdress but filled in. Yeah, a little bit. And then over here you see a Dax with the, a Duviri Dax with the sun and moon. This is just like a typical Dax Gladius. Weird, because he does have the sun and moon, but only Teshin has those, so I don't know. As far as, I don't think, yeah, we don't really see any of the Dax Duviri with the two swords, but if Teshin's swords were sort of like Dax standard issue, then in theory you could see some Duviri Dax somewhere with the same setup. Here we've got a torch or a fire, with the floating rings. I will be honest, I only know it's a fire because it's literally called that in, like, it's like a dojo decoration or something. Does not seem to be a fire to me, but, I mean, it is if you, like, think about it. But the rings really threw me off. I just thought it was, like, a weird decorative thing. And then here you've got, like, a wall panel with, oh, huh. Again, very interesting. You just have like a decorative wall panel that's supposed to just have some mural with Kaiths and these courtiers. This is the old version of Loden that we saw. This is the old version of what I called Sithis that we saw, which is apparently not Sithis. And this is some other thing. This is some other person. I don't think it's Bombastain because it's short and doesn't have the thing on the head or on the chest. But the interesting thing about this that I've just now noticed is that he's this person is holding a mask in his hand, with a sad facial expression. So again, this is like very theater vibes of like holding on the mask and taking it off and swapping it, and Bombastine is one of the few characters who actually has something to say about the masks. When you fight him, oh no, it's not over here. It's over here. Yeah. Bombastine is the only let's see. So as far as masks go, if I'm remembering correctly, there's only a couple of mentions of them in the lore. The Acrithis has something that she says that implies that the masks have something to do with dignity or decorum. And then there's another thing that Bombastine says when you're fighting his aura worm. He says when you're fighting him and he's obviously really mad at you, he says, "I'll take your face and make it my new mask." And so I don't, there's a lot you could potentially read into that. In terms of like are the Duviri masks in general made from people's faces? That seems pretty extreme. Is this something that Bombastine just said because he's upset? But yeah, so if Bombastine is the most sort of theatrical of all of the characters in Duviri, and so it's also interesting that he would have this line about the masks, which are a very theatrical sort of implement. And does he have multiple masks? And does he change them out? That's I think it's an interesting thought, and potentially a lot of territory for them to explore if they ever wanted to come back to Duviri, which who knows. All right. So here we've got a monolith. These are the structures that are at various points. They used to be save points, and they are in the original iteration of Duviri. Well, in the version that we saw at the demo in 2022, these were save points. And now they're just sort of healing points. We don't really have save points in Duviri. But yeah, these things are always, again, they're mentioned once by some random person who says that they make you feel good when you stand near them, which makes sense because they literally heal you. But yeah, these in older Duviri concept art and stuff, and in the old 2019 trailer, again, you had these structures on the tops of hills, and so this makes me think that this is actually a remnant of the Zariman terraforming thing, because you've got these weird tubes coming out of it, almost like legs or tentacles, and they are like this in the game, although I think not necessarily to this extent, where it's like a completely different material like this. But to me, it seems again like they are sort of extruding the landscape or extruding something, and so to me it feels like the monoliths are sort of remnants of that original idea that you'd have these devices that generate the terrain. And yeah, lore-wise, I'm not really sure what they're supposed to represent these days. And they do have this person inside of them, or a statue of a person, and again, that just further confuses things. Over here you've got a couple of chests. You've got the big locked chest, that you have to either unlock with the puzzle or fight the big Dax over Thrax thing. And then you've just got the destructible ones over here. And then you've got a nice statue of Dominus Thrax on... Actually, Well, you got a statue of someone on a chariot being pulled by Kaiths. Honestly, it doesn't look like Dominus Thrax at all. Doesn't really have the face or the armor. It does have the long arm, but so do a lot of people in Duviri. But yeah, I mean, all the statues of this type are with Dominus Thrax. But the person on here doesn't look like Dominus Thrax at all. So that's a little interesting. Here you've got some of the buildings, the architecture that we talked about. They're very into arches and circles. So you've got this bridge, and this is very similar to really the bridges as they appear in the game, with you've just got like this like sort of gatehouse type structure on the ends of it. You've got this house with like a porch. This one's interesting because there's sort of like two intersecting rectangles here, and the one on the bottom is like the main house, and the one on the top is really just decorative, it seems, unless there's a part on the other side that on like the back of the house that contains like a living structure. But as far as what we can see, it looks like it just has this extra roof and then this thing at the front, really just for decorative purposes. And this is a little bit more complex than what we see in the game, but is still the same style. Here you have sort of a diagonal garden type structure that you can walk underneath. And then this one is truly interesting to me. This one is really interesting. It looks like a whoops. My watch thought I was talking to it. This is like some sort of this is like a vault or some sort of facility built into the side of a mountain. So you've got these stairs leading up to the big door, and it's guarded by Dax, and there's like giant statues of Dax faces in the archway, and then there's like a big door. It looks like a vault to me. And then you've got the secondary entrance also being guarded. This is super cool, and I would really have loved. I'd really like to see something like this and like get some more. Is this like some sort of secret facility that Dominus Thrax has? That's very interesting to me. And then over here you've got a bunch of different faces. These are all female faces and different types of masks and headdresses. Let's see. As we've established, I have apparently a very poor memory for what the characters in-game look like, so I won't try to draw any connections, but just different styles of the headdress, and then a few of them have masks. And then it's interesting to note that of the citizens in Duviri, they almost all wear masks except for the children. And there are let's see, Akrithis shows her face. She wears a helmet that covers her face, but when you talk to her, it does open. But the courtiers, and I think there's one of the random civilians doesn't wear a mask, or a couple of them, but even most of them do wear masks. And the interesting thing is that you have some masks that cover the whole face, like here and here, here and here, and then you have some that just cover the eyes, like here and here and here, and here. And I remember I tried to like look for some connection between the characters who have full face masks versus some who only have like the half face mask. I didn't really notice anything. And the civilians, obviously they're largely they don't have names or anything. so you can't really draw too many inferences off of those. But yeah, just, you know, more things to think about regarding the masks. All right. Just flip forward a little bit. We've got lots of very interesting concept art for the rest of this section. So, yeah, some of this artwork is really hard to parse. So here you've got a big like Colosseum structure, or like just a big structure being held up on like the end of a long pole, and then you see others here against a red sky. It kind of looks like the anger sky. Anger, when the spiral is in angry, the sky has these like big vortices or almost portals in the sky. And it is of course red. So this is like the anger sky. But yeah, I have no idea what this is supposed to really be. The inside of this dome looks like the inside of the Pantheon in Rome, with like the square cutouts. So it reminds me of like a big Roman building, and obviously there's a lot of Roman influence in Duviri. But yeah, over here you've got you've got the red sky. I'm not really drawing anything from that. You've got the base of a giant pillar here and a couple of monoliths. The thing that is interesting, and I'm not sure how well this comes across over the stream, but that the whole landscape is actually composed of these tubes or snaking, you know, tentacles, similar to what we see extruded by the monolith. I guess. But yeah, everything is like made of these tubes, like the floor here and the wall, or like the ground here underneath these stairs is all made of this substance that's just like piles of like these tubes or you know, tendrils and stuff like that. So and again, it's coming out of the monoliths here on either side of this pillar. There's a large thing at the top of this hill, which might be a monolith or might be a big pillar or construction of some kind. But yeah, I think this is also, this just continues to play into my theory that the monoliths were part of the Zariman terraforming machines that created and generated the terrain in these weird tube structures, which eventually turned to like normal ground, I guess. There are also, by the way, faces or heads with faces in the foreground that are also, you know, connected to these tubes, which is a little unsettling. Alright, over here you've got an oral worm just sort of flying through a giant tunnel. With some structures that is in this underground space. Not really too sure what to make else of this photo. This just like a large underground place with an oarworm flying through it. Like, okay. And then here you've got. This is a little hard to see. Like, the contrast on this image is not great. But there's like, so there's like a podium here with a speaking area, and then there's like a group of people over here receiving the speech in this sort of pyramid, in this diagonal like place, and then there's like a weird chasm in between the two. Honestly, this doesn't look very Duviri to me at all. It kind of almost looks corpus in the shape, not the overall aesthetic, but like the corpus really like their weird pyramids. Especially if you remember like the old IO map that was just like a pyramid with the defense objective on the top. Yeah, this is super weird to me. This doesn't really look like anything we see in Duviri. However, there are Duviri citizens in the audience, and I assume Dominus Thrax is at this podium speaking, with like again the little servant Dax guy behind him, and Dominus Thrax is throwing up a pretty controversial salute with his right arm there, which is pretty weird, and then it's being mirrored by some of the people in the crowd. So yeah, that is, I guess, interesting. I'm not really sure what else to say about that. And then, you know, there's some statues in the foreground that are facing away from the camera. But yeah, you know, someone, presumably Thrax, giving a speech to the citizens. Not really something that we see Thrax do a lot, really, or have heard about him doing. Anyway, here you have the Zariman, and this is the Zariman sort of stranded in, presumably, the void in this blue and magenta area. And so here you actually see the land literally radiating out from the ship, like, I don't know, like the peel of a banana, sort of, you know, splitting off in all directions. Just supporting Twitter, yeah. Yeah, Dominus Thrax, big fan of Twitter. But yeah, you see the landscape sort of radiating outward from the ship, and then again you see these little pillars, monoliths, other, you know, devices that I believe are involved in generating the terrain. Although in this case, it seems the most clear that the terrain is literally emanating from the Zariman ship itself. And then you've got the beginnings of a Duviri structure here with its characteristic weird arch and curve structures. And then down here you have like a wide shot of Duviri. This is the closest, I would say, to anything on this page to Duviri as we see it. The landscape is a lot more in line with how we know it. And you've got like the weird holes in the landscape and the hills, and then, you know, very Duviri architecture. These specific buildings we don't see. This is just like a very tall, narrow arch, like semicircle thing. And then this is like a fairly complex building. It almost looks like some sort of factory or you know, complex. And then you've got some people, and then in the very distance you see the Zariman embedded in a chunk of terrain, looking almost exactly the way it does in the game. Although this is like a lot closer to the horizon. You know, the Zariman is usually pretty is like kind of up in the sky. But yeah, this is very similar to Final Duviri, you know. And then here you just see, I would say, probably older versions of what Duviri was supposed to be or look like. Here we have, on both of these pictures actually, another shot of like the Zariman stuck in midair with land growing out from around it. Here is like a very thin sort of skein of land. And then again, you see these pillars here, dotted throughout the landscape. So, you know, these are always there. And even though you don't see these specific types of pillars other than the monoliths in normal Duviri, if you actually like go into the skybox and take a look at the island that Duviri has, that the Zariman is embedded into within Duviri, it does have these monument type looking things on it. It's really hard to resolve because it's like a faraway element of the skybox, but it does have, you know, these things are on the island that the Zariman is stuck into in Duviri. And here you see the Zeraman Island is more substantive. It doesn't look as thin as it does over here. It's got more of a terrain and texture. Here the pillars in the landscape are a lot taller and thinner, and they seem to sort of be catching the void energy and like harnessing it, or maybe they're just conducting it for some reason. Almost like lightning, though. It's like flowing into them and around them over here and here. I mean, I guess it could just be a coincidence, but it does seem that they're sort of channeling the void energies for also on over here also too. And then yeah, you see the fractal generation of the terrain around over here. And then yeah, and you also see sort of energy sort of radiating away from the Zeraman. You see this sort of halo effect here. Yeah, very interesting. I really wonder. Looks almost like how mold spreads. I assume you're talking about this one over here with the flat landscape. Yeah, this one does seem very mold-like to me, I would say. This one, it can, I guess, you can think of it as sort of like a fungus in terms of its 3D shape, but it's not the first thought I would have. So here we've got, so, well, first up top, you've got the drifter, the drifter in the foreground looking out at the Duviri landscape, including, and then you have the Zeraman and its Duviri Island. Yeah. But and then you've got these currents of void energy in the sky. But the weird thing about this is that you've got all this debris floating. It almost seems like it's like space Duviri, you know? Maybe this is Duviri being formed, although being formed out of like accretion from these rocks and debris is not generally how we see Duviri as having formed in the lore. Well, we've just gone through some of the weird concept art of Duviri being created. So, yeah, this one is interesting. Maybe these islands are being destroyed, which we know the islands are and have been. But, but yeah, this, it looks like, it's like night sky, space looking. I don't know, this image is very... it's just weird and a little hard to interpret with all these the floating rocks and what that's supposed to represent here. And then these other three images, they show like a lot more futuristic Duviri. Like this is like a very developed and like complex sort of civilization, more than we see it in game. And possibly this is like the future of Duviri. It looks very futuristic, almost like a spacefaring civilization. You've got like giant domes. You've got pretty dense architecture. There's like a city versus the sort of medieval town looking areas that Duviri is mostly composed of. And then you've got these floating rings. This one in specific looks like, I would say it looks like an oral worm that's just completely straight. Because you've got a rod, and then you've got these two ring assemblies around it. And oral worms have that. So, and then over here you have the ring with like a rod coming off of it, but it disappears behind this building. And then over here you just see a ring. So I don't know if these are like evolved versions of the oral worms or if this is something else. But you've just got these like floating structures. These floating objects here. You've got another what appears to be a floating object over here. And then you've just, like I said, you've got these like tall, dense buildings. close together. Over here you have examples of Duviri buildings, and these are much more complex. You see the same overall aesthetic shape of like the curves and the semicircles and like the long U shapes and arches and stuff like that. But here they're like repeated. Like there's like many layers of the line over here, and like in this U shape, there's there's more texture within it. The shapes in Duviri, they have the overall shape, but it's very basic, Here you've got like a ring over here. You see like a very repeated use of almost like wire thin U arches, but like a bunch of them in succession and next to each other. So yeah, this is like the busy version of Duviri. It's like repeated and complex and like rigid almost. Ridged, not rigid. But yeah, this is very weird. I will say I don't like it. I like the other version of this version of Duviri versus like this busy version of Duviri. And this Duviri City interests me. It intrigues me, but again, I feel like it's I don't like it as much. And then it looks like we're back. Back to normal Duviri. So, here you've got all of these 3 places are like set in like a grassy meadow or like shrub area, which is funny. Here you've got, I guess this is actually more of a farm, because you see the big grain silo here in the distance, and also possibly attached to this building. So this could be like a grain or a wheat farm area. You see these fence boundary post type things. And then you got this big thing. I'm not sure if this is a statue or just some sort of other decorative thing. But yeah, I think this is supposed to be a farmhouse. Here you've got a variety of houses in the same general type of landscape. And I guess here again you see a silo, what is probably a silo. But you also have like a tree, so this is like not obviously in the midst of the planting fields. Yeah, a couple of large buildings over here, and then like a more dwelling structure over here with a person in the foreground. And then this one is interesting because this is a building of indeterminate function, but it's got a pipeline going into it. And a pipeline is it's a very interesting thing for me to think about in terms of like Duviri. Like, is it water? Is it like fucking oil? Or kuva or some other material? Water is the most likely choice, but it sort of implies a level of industrialization that Duviri doesn't really seem to have, I guess, outside of its wind electricity for some reason. And then, yeah, here we've got just a broader shot of Duviri and one of its main islands. Presumably this is like you're standing on one island and looking at the next one, because you've got this bridge. And this is an interesting bridge because it's actually two bridges that mirror each other. We don't have anything like that. So all the bridges between islands that we see so far are just a simple bridge. But this one's got two, and then so there's like an island over here in the foreground, and then you can sort of see over here a curve of the island that the camera is standing on. And also over here, there's like a little piece of land. And then you're mostly looking at this other island. Duviri, as we know, it does have these weird, especially at the edges or like on like ridges or mountainsides, it's got these curved areas where it sort of goes into a loop, And in a couple of places, these pieces actually complete into a circle, and there's like this weird spider web lattice in the middle of them. Yeah, just like another aspect of Duviri that I would love to sort of get some more information on, like what is that supposed to mean or represent, and like why is it like that. I think, yeah, none of these really have that spider web lattice in the middle of the circle, but it does show up in the game. But yeah, you know, the edge, just like you got these like incomplete circle type things. And then in the background, you can see the hands of the giant Dominus statue that sort of floats off of the edge of one of the islands. So, you know, based on this looks like this is supposed to be like the main central island, and the camera is sort of standing on the small island that, you know, Thrax's palace is on, where you start the quest. And then this is the bridge from the palace to the mainland, or the larger island. There's not really a mainland, I guess. But of course, that bridge in the game is not a double bridge like this. But that's and then this is roughly where the hand and face statue is. It's sort of on this end of that larger island. This doesn't. I mean, it doesn't totally look like how that island looks in game, but that's sort of what it seems to me to be. And then, yeah, in the void that is around and underneath and above Duviri, you know, you just got these general currents of energy like you always do, but here it seems like you have a face being sort of illuminated or formed of the void energy. It's hard to say. I don't know if that's really a face or if that's just like, you know, human pattern recognition and it's just a weird bright spot, but to me it sort of looks like it has eyes and a nose. And of course Duviri is famous for having giant heads and faces in weird places, so there's really, I would say, not a good way to tell. So here, this is recognizable as concept art that showed off at TennoCon, and I believe in the Codex. I think this is actually not the Codex, but I think this is like the artwork that's used for the Bleeding Earth story in the Lost Island fragments. You know, again, you've got the arch, the weird semicircle of Earth, and then some buildings, and just like the weird landscape. Excalibur in the foreground for scale. Here's some more landscape with, you know, the weird fractal patterns, the weird curves and circles. Excalibur for scale. Case over here. Some buildings. It is really interesting to me that whenever you see landscape and, you know, you got these concept arts showing off like the landscape, there's always like buildings on it. It's like it's almost like the Duviri architecture rises up out of the earth and it's like is as much a part of the world as the landscape itself, which plays into a lot of, because Duviri came into existence based on conceptual embodiment. You know, like the concept of it comes from the story that Eularia and Truddy wrote, and the Duviri, or the Drifter with their emotions, and like the Void's power brought that to life. And so, yeah, you would imagine, generally we know that, like, you know, probably the buildings and all the architecture and stuff came into existence at the same time as the rest of the land, because Duviri was formed in such an unnatural way. But all of these concepts that show other, you know, all these concepts that show Duviri being created, even in ways other than the conceptual embodiment way, where they're coming off, where they're, you know, just being grown by the Zariman. You see the buildings are there. Like, here the land is just coming off of the ship, and you've got a Duviri building here. And in other concept art as well, you know, if we just flip to the beginning of this section, here. Okay, no, this is the one exception. There's no Duviri structures here, except for the giant pillars. But yeah, here, you know, the focus is on like the weird landscape, and then you've got buildings here. And here the focus is on like the weird landscape, and then you've got buildings. It's like, you know, it really seems to me that like they're really treating the buildings and the architecture as much of the world as the land, which I would say is just a really interesting sort of concept to me. Here you've got more, you know, this one's got more buildings in it than landscape. They kind of seem broken down, at least some of these things, and like these walls and stairs, they seem to be like broken and crumbling. It's a little hard to tell because the picture's kind of small for how complex it is. This is also a little bit different than most of your architecture. It's got more squares than sort of round shapes in it. It's got like, you know, these bumpy, you know, square, you know, diagonal part here, and then you've literally just got these rectangles here, just in the ground. Up here, this one is a little hard to see what is. Yeah, it's a little hard to see what's going on here. I think this is another Nether Barrow thing where you've got the buildings underneath the landscape. And this one is actually, yeah. I mean, it's dark and there's not a lot of contrast, so it's hard to make out details. But this actually looks a little bit closer to what the Nether Barrow looks like than that weird concept earlier. Because it's like it's attached to the rock above it. It's hanging off of the underside of the island. And then you have light shining through the island through the various holes in the landscape. Yeah. But yeah, this is like a building structure or complex, just, you know, growing off of the bottom of the landscape, as the Nether Barrow does. And then let's see, over here, this one is weird because you've got these tall pieces of land floating sort of in the middle of this circle area. It does in a few ways remind me of the Ark Arbor, or even more so, Kullervo's Hold, which is like a very long. It's a large island that sort of spirals down. You've got the main prison complex in the center, but you've got the land sort of floating around it in a downward spiral. And you start at the top, which is where like the warden is and his house. But if you wanted to, you can just walk all the way around down the spiral and end up at like the bottom, and even below the arena where you fight Kullervo, there's like some caves where his sword is. And there's like a child guarding the sword. And so that's what this sort of reminds me of. You've got like the tall landscape in the middle, and then you've got like the landscape sort of around it, ringing it. Other than that, I'm not really sure what else to make of this, because other than Kullervo's Hold, this doesn't really resemble anything in Duviri so far. This looks like a swamp area of Duviri, honestly. This is like, I don't really know how else to put it. It's a part of it, I guess, is the color. It just looks like a swampy area of Duviri. That's just got a lot more holes than normal. And then yeah, here we see the, I guess this is presumably the Zariman Island, because it's got the Zariman in it, it seems. but it's also got a lot of Dominus Thrax statues. There's maybe these aren't even statues. Maybe these are, well, I would guess that these are statues. They could be just actual thrones with people sitting in them. Maybe there was a version of the story where there were multiple, Dominus Thraxes or similar types of characters. And there's a bunch of them just sitting around on thrones. But I think it's more likely that these are just probably statues of Thrax on his throne. And then you've got an Excalibur in the middle to scale. But yeah, and then the void sky looks a lot more turbulent and dark in this one. As far as I know, there are no statues of Dominus Thrax on the Zeraman Island. Here's another. This is another picture that was shown off at TennoCon, where you've got like a giant. You've got the giant face and hands that are just sort of embedded in the landscape. And then you've got one of the Duviri Dax on the cave here. You've got a few Dax and Kaiths in this picture, actually, in various places. Here is the hand and face statue that floats in the sky. This is an interesting take because here they're actually islands. They're not like statues. In the game, they are just metal replicas of like Giant, of his arms and his head, and I think it's like those three pieces separately. But here there's like land growing around them, and it's almost like they're coming up out of the land. And there's like grass and plants and stuff. And on this island, you actually, again, you have the actual Duviri architecture. You have this arch here. And possibly also on the head island as well. And so I think part of the reason that, I think they changed this because this just, it looks interesting, but this thing actually moves around a lot, especially during the quest. It takes on different shapes and forms, and at one point the hand like lowers and you go onto the palm of the hand. So for that simple reason, they couldn't do it like this, because then you'd have the islands just tilting in weird angles. But yeah, this is a little interesting. I think it makes it, the islands don't look, or the statue doesn't look as menacing this way. So that's probably another reason why they changed that concept. But yeah, it is interesting to see the concept of it where like statues are actually just islands. They're their own small islands of Duviri. And then here you've got, this is sort of like the boundary in between two islands. You've got land over here, big island over here, and then, just the crumbling parts in the middle floating around. Here's some more landscape. This one actually has two giant heads embedded in the land. There's one over here and one over here. And again, you've got buildings just sort of sprouting up in the middle. This one shows an island all by itself. This is like this seems like an island that's like in the middle of being formed. The spirals are not going in any particular direction. And so it's almost like, it's like three-dimensional rather than just a flat area of land. Because it's like also growing upwards and downwards. It doesn't seem to know in which direction it's supposed to spread. And yeah. It's interesting. There's like, there's void energy coming off of the spirals, almost as if like, that's the direction that they're going to grow in. That's like how they're going to spread maybe. We never really see islands being formed in game, and if we take Acrithis at face value, it seems like all the islands were formed at once at the start, and then over time they've been destroyed or lost one by one. She says that no new islands have ever formed, Presumably, she's not talking about Kullervo's hold, which she later talks about. It did form when Kullervo showed up, but in general, like, you don't get new islands. Duviri was formed at once in one sitting, and then and you know, and then no more. So but it would be interesting if we could see more of that happening. There's like a shot in the Duviri Paradox quest towards the end where you see the Drifter sort of in the moment of creating Duviri and Dominus Thrax. And if you like look at the window, you can sort of see what looks like Duviri forming. But it's a still image. It's like a diorama that moves. Or like the camera moves, but time isn't progressing, so you don't actually see Duviri being formed, which is a shame. Alright, so here you've got a variety of different areas. These are all fairly similar to areas in the game, but not quite. You've got this like large planter with a tree growing out of like sort of on the side of it. This does happen, I think, in a couple of different places. You can see this type of thing. I think one of these is near the Citadel, and one of these is there's like an area. One of the areas where you can fight the Dax Equitem on horseback has like a tree in like the middle of that little arena, like this. This is probably supposed to be Bombastein's amphitheater. It looks a lot different. It looks a little bit different. The amphitheater is sort of on a hill that's in the middle of like the weird spiral lake on the main island. So it's a little more isolated than this one. But yeah, this is the amphitheater. It's, you know, you've got this giant thing floating in the air. That just sort of signals that's where it is. And then this is, or not. I guess I shouldn't say this is an amphitheater. It's like the place where Bombastein is. But this is the place that's actually called the amphitheater. This is its own island that only shows up during various spirals. And you can also find it as an Undercroft tile. And this is like an actual, and it doesn't quite look like this, but it's got an actual sort of audience area, and a big stage. And this, I mean, this is just some generic thing. Duviri landscape with like a random arch, random buildings. A lot of the places and like things in Duviri don't really seem to serve a purpose, which is fine because it's like a a dream world conjured by a children's storybook, which was written by an Oricon, and the Oricon already make things that don't make sense. So it's really like 3 or 4 levels of abstraction. So you wouldn't really expect much of the things to have function over form. But I guess it is just funny to note. Here you've got like almost like a rainforest or jungle type area within Duviri, which is not really something that we see. Very colorful vegetation. Yeah, it would be interesting to see. I honestly would love Duviri to be expanded on more. You know, I would love for them to add new islands. Akritha says that never happens, and she actually feels pretty melancholic about it. You know, she's, she says that like, literally things are only ever getting worse, and things have never gotten better. So, adding new islands to Duviri, I think would be great in terms of adding new lore and story and environments. Cool environments like this that we don't yet see in Duviri. But on like another level, they would just like presumably make Akrithis less unhappy, and that is for some reason. For some reason, I was like going through her fragments, and then she talks about how the islands are only ever disappearing; they're never new ones showing up, and just what that means for the future of Duviri. And I was like, oh, that feels. I'm sad now. So literally, just like being able to fix or reverse that would be its own sort of reward for me. Let's see. Here you've got, these are 2 shots of Teshin's cave. Here you've got the 3 starter warframes kneeling, and then here you've got sort of the side area. You've got Teshin sort of kneeling down in this clearing. You've got the weird random stuff he's got on the walls, like candles and stuff. A Shazin. I honestly don't remember if you see if he has a Shazin in his cave or not. I guess I can go check. All right. This is the last page here, which is good. We are actually coming up on the close to the 2-hour mark. Holy shit! I didn't notice that the first time. So anyway, this is like a big Duviri town. These are very large buildings. There's an Excalibur here to scale, so these are actually much larger than the buildings that we typically see in Duviri. This sort of seems to be a little. This is almost like busy Duviri. That we saw earlier. It's not quite as busy and not as sci-fi, but it is still more detailed than the normal Duviri stuff. It looks, I don't know, it looks abandoned to me, and part of that is, well, there's the fact that there's no characters here other than the Excalibur. There's no other characters, I'm pretty sure. But part of that is also like the buildings are like brown. They look a little bit. They don't look like they're falling apart, but they kind of look abandoned to me. Maybe neglected. And then the sky is also black and white, which is actually the case for a lot of these images, and I do believe that's on purpose, because Duviri is all about color scale, and stuff like that. So yeah, to me this seems sort of abandoned. However, the thing that I didn't notice the first time I looked at this image, because we've gone through this section before when the stream wasn't working, and I flipped through it a couple of pages times since then. I have literally never noticed this till just now. There's a giant Oro worm up here, and it is about to destroy this whole place, or at least cause some problems. And it is like right here. The sky being in grayscale, I think, does a lot to obscure that. But yeah, that's really funny. If you read the fragments, the lore fragments, yeah, Lone Wolf, there's an Oro worm at the top. Yep. Yeah. It looks somewhat sterile. Yeah, like the landscape, the whole picture looks sterile and like dead. I think this grayscale plays a big role in that, one way or the other. But yeah, if you read the fragments, the Oro worms and specifically Loden, it seems, they're sent to destroy islands that Thrax doesn't like or doesn't want. So they are capable of like literally busting up entire islands of Duviri. So yeah, the fact that it is looming like that is pretty scary. And yeah, so that's that. The next section is the arsenal, which is a bunch of, we just go through it real quick. It's a bunch of weapons and also skins. Ooh, what is that? Weapons, skins, armor attachments, helmets and stuff like that. It's just called Arsenal is the section. Yeah, so here are the deluxe skins. So we'll be going through that next time. That Exco will have a bad time, yeah. A lot of these just a full page Liger and Uzaka concepts, lol. And then, so yeah, there's the Arsenal section, which it's pretty big and it's also pretty dense. So I think that might actually take longer than the normal 2 hours to go through that section. So we might have to split that up, or I might just do a really long section. I guess we'll see. And then there's a gallery, which is mostly, it seems like UI and art assets. That they needed to make for the game. So that was the Duviri section. Man, this book is so big every time. I'm just like, holy shit. But yeah, so that was the Duviri section. We're close to the end of the book. Only, you know, a handful more of these sessions. And then that'll be a wrap. So, and then yeah, we are, I guess, through the more story and lore focused segments of the art book. The rest, as we've seen, are just sort of going to be individual bits and pieces, really. And you know, there will be things that we can talk about there for sure. So yeah. All right. So that'll be that's a wrap on this stream, and then I will see you guys in the future.